Inshallah ta'ala, our first speaker is going to be Nouman, Ustad Nouman. And this is the first time in my life, I think, I'm introducing him. Because we're always sitting together on stage, trolling each other, sending text messages to each other while we're speaking. So if you ever see him crack a random smile while he's speaking, it's because I texted him something funny. And if you ever see me crack a random smile, it's because he texted me something not so funny. But alhamdulillah, Ustad Nouman, he's one of my best friends. And I'm not just saying that. A lot of times we kind of have to say that. Close friend, best friend. I've only met a guy 2 or 3 times, but he's one of my best friends, alhamdulillah. We've known each other for over 10 years, alhamdulillah. And I'm very, very grateful that he took time out of his very busy schedule to come and join us today. Even though we are close, he's very, very, very busy. And he actually just left his Bayna campus, alhamdulillah, to join us today. So I really appreciate him. He has no idea how much I appreciate him being a part of this. And he recognized immediately the importance of this class, alhamdulillah. No hesitation. Usually you have to nag him a little bit to get him to do something. But mashallah, no hesitation for this class. So I ask Allah to reward him and bless him for his time and bless his campus and his project and everything that he does and all of his da'wah and his family. Allahumma ameen. With that, I'll ask him to come up, inshallah.
I think so. This is hard. Are we there yet? Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyid al-Anbiya'i wal Mursaleen, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man istanna bi sunnatihi ila yawm al-din. Allahumma ij'alna minhum wa min alladhina amanu wa 'amilu salihat wa tawasaw bil haqq wa tawasaw bis sabr. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. I'd like to start with a couple of corrections. The first of them is I always keep my cell phone off when he's in the audience. And also, okay, so very quickly, I want to share with you an interesting story first before I share a couple of things from the ayat that are really powerful. This just happened 2 days ago. My kids were at somebody's house and they were watching a YouTube video. And this movie that recently came out, Frozen? They were watching there was some Nigerian church that did a performance of one of the songs from this movie. Okay, so this is a very Nigerian church. So they set up this stage that simulates ice, and there are all these Nigerian men that are singing in a choir. They're all wearing white suits. White suits, white shirts, white ties. But they're very, very dark skinned. They're not just black, they're extremely black. And they're singing and there are children dancing in front, and this is performance going on. And my younger son, Walid, is watching this. And he's really getting into it. I wasn't there, I was traveling at the time, and he was at somebody's house watching this, and he's really enjoying this performance. And he's listening to it, and he goes in the middle of the performance, he goes, I love those white guys. And when I heard that, I was so happy. Because it reaffirms something about human nature. Children aren't racist. Children are colorblind. All he sees is the guy's dressed in white, so he calls him a white guy. He doesn't see the color of his skin, he just sees it's a guy. That's all he sees. And that's not just him, that's all children. We instill these artificial values. We decide to, identify people with color, with the color of their skin. That's not something naturally occurring to the human being, subhanAllah. Allah just didn't put that in our nature. Our kids, when we make teams, and when kids are being picked for teams and who's going to be on what, I want the green one. Oh, no, I want to hang out with the purple one. And they're going by the shirt they're wearing. not by the colors of the skin or the lighter one or the darker one. Subhanallah. So there are 2 things I want to talk about today in terms of the Quran. There are 2 passages that are of extreme value on this subject, and I think if we understood them properly, we would gain some pretty deep insight about the way Allah Azza wa Jalla himself deals with the matter of race. One of these passages is Makki, it's from early Revelation, and the other passage that was recited today is Madani, it's from later Revelation, after the Prophet ﷺ moved to Medina. So the first passage is from Surah Al-Rum, the 30th surah of the Quran. And in this passage, Allah wants us to pay attention and reflect on some of his miraculous signs, his ayat. The purpose of ayat, just as a recap really quickly, ayat are of many kinds, and which I'm going to continue to call them ayat even though I mean miraculous signs, right? I'm going to use the term ayat, I prefer it. Ayat are, the purpose of them is to bring you closer to Allah. The purpose of ayat is to guide. That is the purpose. And so Allah divides ayat into many. There are ayat inside of ourselves. There are ayat in the skies. There are ayat in all of Allah's creation. And then there are ayat of revelation. Revelation itself, every piece of revelation in the Quran is an ayat. All of that is also an ayah. And the purpose of it is it guides you. Now, what's the logical relationship between a sign and guidance? Very quickly. Assalamu alaikum. I have to pause this for a second. Oops. No. Okay. So what was I talking about? Ayat. Okay. Make it very simple so your children and the audience can understand without a problem. When you see a sign on the road, the purpose of a sign is, the sign is not your destination. The sign points to a destination. The sign is facilitating your journey. It is not the conclusion of your journey. Isn't that true? But you're grateful for a sign because without the sign you wouldn't know which exit to take or which direction to go in. You wouldn't know where you are. So the purpose of signs, literally in our daily lives, is to guide. Okay, in the physical sense, the ayat or alamat, these are the purpose of them is to guide us to a destination. And the legacy of the human being is to reach his ultimate destination, which is Allah Azza wa Jalla, the meeting with Allah. And so his ayat, the purpose of them is to guide us through the journey of life and to be able to eventually reach Him. Now, having said that, there are some ayat in this passage. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, I'm picking here and I'll go from وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَكُم مِّن تُرَابٍ, and among His miraculous signs is that He created you from dirt. So the first of these ayat in this particular passage is reminding us where we come from. Is putting us in our place. And when you call someone dirt, or when you think of yourself as dirt, then you're basically thinking of yourself as worthless. You're thinking of yourself as something that should be cleaned off, something that's not pure. In other words, the idea of us being from dirt is already putting us in a place of humility. And as we will soon see, racism is directly related to a lack of humility. If one is not capable of being humble, one is not capable of being able to remove racist ideas or supremacist ideas from themselves. Because obviously when you think, or anybody thinks of one race as superior than another, or one nation better than another, then obviously they think of themselves as higher, which is rooted in arrogance itself. So Allah says they're created from dirt. ثُمَّ إِذَا أَنْتُمْ بَشَرٌ تَنْتَشِرُونَ. Then all of a sudden you are bashar, you are people, and this is also an interesting word, bashar, because it comes from bisha. It's translated as people, or human beings, but actually the word bashar comes from bisha, which means skin, which is cool, because Allah is now alluding to skin. And you are people that have skin running around. And one of the reasons the Arab linguists argue the human being is called bashar, from bisha, is unlike other animals, they're covered in fur. Right? So their skin color doesn't show. We don't know what the skin color of a goat is necessarily when we see it, because it's covered in its fur. You know? But human beings aren't mostly covered in fur. So you know, we know what our skin colors are. So Allah alludes to our skin as part of our humanity in the ayah. So ثُمَّ إِذَا أَنْتُمْ بَشَرٌ تَنْتَشِرُونَ. You're spread all over the place. Then even reflecting on the word spread all over the place suggests that human beings are going to be in different corners of the world. They're going to be all over the place. But no matter where they are, high and low, Europe or Asia, America or Africa, it doesn't matter. They should all remember that they came from dirt. And that they should all remember that they all share this skin whose origin is the same patch of earth. It's the same mud from which they came. Now, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا. Then out of His miraculous signs is that He created you, or for you, spouses from your own selves. Now Allah is referring to the relationship between the male and the female. And this is another interesting thing. When we're talking about nations, ethnicities, you know, different communities living in harmony with each other, you can't talk about harmony at a social scale if you don't establish harmony inside a household. The first harmony is between the man and the woman. And part of, arrogance, the first manifestation of arrogance is the conflict between man and woman, as a matter of fact. So if you can remember that you were created for each other, so you can find peace and tranquility in each other, إِلَيْهَا وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً, and He put extreme love and loving courtesy between you. He installed it among you. Then he says again, إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. In all of that, there are certainly many miraculous signs for people that choose to reflect. Now, I told you before, what's the purpose of a sign? To guide. To guide. To remain humble. Remaining humble, remembering that we came from dirt, was going to give us guidance. Being good to our spouse, having peaceful relations with our spouse, is going to lead to our guidance. All of these, and reflecting on that is going to give us guidance. But the next one, this is really the reason I picked this passage. وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ خَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. And among His miraculous signs is the creation of the skies and the earth. Now before I go on in the rest of this incredible ayah, the skies and the earth, does that include a few or countless creations? That's countless creations. And are they monolithic? Are they all the same kind of creation? Or is there diverse kind of creation in the skies and the earth? It's incredibly diverse. It's incredibly diverse. And actually the beauty of this earth, let's not even think about the skies, because that's way too big for us to think about. We can barely even think about the first sky. Let's, for a moment, think about the earth. And we living in Dallas, Texas, can appreciate this. We have a real appreciation for nature in Dallas because we don't have any around us. Right? So when you go to a city with mountains, when you go to a city with ocean, when you go to a city with trees, you'll notice it immediately. It'll stick out. Wow, so green here. Wow, that's really beautiful. Look at those snow-covered mountains. Look at that scene. Now, Allah Azza wa Jalla made this earth diverse. He made it different kinds of terrain. And part of the beauty of the earth is that it is different kinds of terrain. As a matter of fact, you'll find people that live in one kind of place, with one kind of terrain, for vacation and for really enjoying the beauty of the earth, they will always go to a place that is of a different kind of terrain. If somebody lives at a beach in Hawaii, their vacation is not going to be a beach in California. They already enjoy the beach. They're probably going to head to the mountains or something. They'll go somewhere else, you see. Human beings appreciate beauty through diversity, through contrast, So Allah says, reflect on the creation of the skies and the earth, and then, this is the part that I really wanted to highlight, He says, وَاخْتِلَافِ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ. And among His miraculous signs is the disagreement and the differences and the contrasts of your tongues. You people speak different languages. And al-sina is different from lughat. Lisan, tongue, is different from language. There's a subtle difference between them. So you can have the same language, and within the same language, people have a different tongue. So you can have a city, and the way people speak in the suburb is different from the way people speak downtown. They have a different lisan. The people that are in a particular kind of business or in a particular kind of profession have a certain tongue, and people in a different line of work have a different kind of tongue. Young people have a different kind of tongue, and old people have a different kind of tongue. It's different, And then, of course, people of different races have different kinds of tongues. And I'm not just talking about across languages. I'm saying even within the same language. We live in the United States, and in the United States, if you travel across the country and pay attention to how people speak, you'll notice that it's not one English. It's actually pretty remarkably different. It's allegedly the same language, but really very, very different. I came to Texas from New York. For a while I didn't think it was an English-speaking state. Then I realized we don't speak English in New York, as a matter of fact. But, the point is, these differences are something for you to reflect on. Now, before I go any further, because it gets juicier and more related to our subject matter, but before I get to that, these diversities, everybody can appreciate a mountain and find beauty in it and appreciate the power of our Creator when they look at a beautiful mountain or they look at the gorgeous ocean and the sun's rays beaming through the ocean. But who looks at somebody with an Indian accent? Who listens to somebody with a little bit of a Swahili kind of on their tongue? Who listens to somebody with a Chinese accent and says, I feel the power of God when I hear this person's dialect as they speak to me in their accent. It's not a spiritual experience. As a matter of fact, the first thing that comes in our minds most of the time is, oh, that guy talks funny. You know, it sounds weird. What is Allah doing in this ayah? He is rearranging the way we think. He's changing the way we think. People having an accent, people speaking differently, even though it's funny at times and it's pretty hilarious sometimes. At the end of the day, what is it? It's a sign of Allah. It's actually Allah molding this person's tongue a certain way. This is what Allah Himself did. This is Allah's craft inside the mouth of every human being. وَاخْتِلَافِ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ. I come from a place in the world called Pakistan, and in Pakistan we have people of different ethnicities. Officially, we're all supposed to speak Urdu, but people who speak Urdu in Karachi are different from people who speak Urdu in Lahore, and they of course make fun of each other for how they speak. You know, Pathans from the northern part of the country, when they speak Urdu, everybody makes fun of the way they speak. It's a common joke, you know. So even within ethnicities, or even within one country, you will find people making fun of the way each other speaks. Now let's go back. If the ayah's purpose, what was the purpose of an ayah? What did I tell you? Okay, if the purpose of an ayah is to guide you, then aren't you grateful for an ayah? And what is worse than somebody who makes fun of the ayat? Who disrespects ayat of Allah? Allah just made everybody's language an ayah. Allah just made everybody's accent. Oof, that's hard one. An ayah. That just became an ayah. SubhanAllah. You know, there were many different dialects among the Arabs. Not all the Arabs spoke the same exact kind of Arabic, and that's even true today. But with all of its diversities, all of them are still ayat. As much as I'm allergic to Ammiya, it's still an ayat. It is. People are speaking it. It is something that Allah Azza wa Jalla put on their tongues. Now, you would think, by the way, language is the first barrier. And this is incredible sociological information. The way to connect with people is through common language. The way to break bridges, or build bridges, not break them, build bridges is by common language. And so you'll find yourself having an easier time. If you just move to high school in the United States and you don't speak any English, you're going to have a hard time making friends. But the moment you start speaking a little bit of English and you can communicate and you can make friends, then you know what? There's going to be easier. It's going to be easier and easier to communicate. You find, for example, people complain. The city I come from, New York City, people complain about racism, and there are ethnic masajids. Like there's a Bangladeshi masjid, there's a Senegalese masjid, there's a Turkish masjid, there's an Indonesian masjid, there's an Arab masjid, and all these masjids have khutbahs in their own local languages. But as a matter of fact, I wouldn't consider that a problem of racism. I really wouldn't. They're only going to these masajid because a lot of these people, they don't speak English well yet. And they have a need to connect with people, so they go to people that speak the same language. It's not even a function of racism. It's just a function of people want to connect with each other. And the easiest way people can connect is what? Is language. Before I studied the Arabic language, I'll tell you something flat honest. I used to think that Arabs are racist. All Arabs are racist. If you don't speak Arabic, you're nothing. And I had personal experiences where I was dealt with in a very condescending way, and I had that opinion as a young college student. When I learned the Arabic language, and I spoke to just a couple of Arabs, just spoke to them in Arabic, I realized that they are a completely different people if you speak to them in their language. All of a sudden, all the assumptions I had disappeared. Because they are a completely different person when you speak to them in their language. It's weird, but it's true. And that's true across the board, across many, many ethnicities. You'll find them becoming very comfortable when you break the barriers of language. Now, so Allah mentions, one of Allah's miraculous signs is the differences in our tongues, in our accents, in our dialects, in the way we speak, in the way we carry our tongues, in our languages too. Okay. But He doesn't stop there. And He says, wa alwanikum. Of His miraculous signs is also the differences in your colors. He went right at it. Now He's just being explicit. He explicitly says, part of what will guide you is the appreciation that all of you as human beings don't share one color. You have a lot of different colors, and some very contrasting colors. And all of those different colors of human beings, just like you go into a field of flowers and you see many different flowers and you appreciate the creative beauty of Allah's creation, and it brings you closer to Allah when you see different people of different color skins and you see them all, you don't say, oh, that's a nice color, that one, Actually, no, you appreciate the creative power of Allah. And not appreciating any one of them is a lack of appreciation and gratitude for a sign of Allah, for an ayah of Allah. The Muslim, if we are nothing if we don't have reverence for ayat, if we don't have respect and regard for ayat. And Allah made the color of human skin an ayah. An ayah. And as a matter of fact, He didn't just make the color of human skin an ayah, He said, وَاخْتِلَافِ أَلْوَانِكُمْ, right? وَاخْتِلَافِ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُمْ. This is the difference between the colors of your skin, or your languages and your tongues, and your colors. Meaning, there are going to be differences. And there are going to be observable differences. My child, when he's very young, sees a guy wearing a white suit and he thinks he's a white guy no matter what color of his skin. But he's not going to be like that by the time he's 20 or 30. He's going to see. It's going to be different. It's going to be obvious that he's different. And he's different from other people of other skins. It's going to be obvious to him. But when it becomes obvious, instead of that becoming a reason for him to distance himself from people, if I raised him as a Muslim correctly, he will see that as an ayah of Allah. He will not see that as a means of his supremacy or somebody else's supremacy over him. That won't be there, And so at the end of this, as I conclude this particular passage, إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِلْعَالِمِينَ. In that, certainly there are some miraculous signs and some pretty powerful lessons for people who know. For people who know. Now we're learning something also that's really cool. I think it's just incredible. Basically, if you fail to appreciate different races, then you don't know, which means you're ignorant. The Quran's commentary on racism early on is that it's a product of a lack of knowledge, it's a product of ignorance. And if we are living in a society that offers an education in engineering, in medicine, in the sciences, in the human sciences, sociology, psychology, we're offering kids high school educations, and at the end of that education you are still racist, then you don't know anything, you're still ignorant. You can have a degree, but you're still ignorant. Because according to the ayah, the only people who can appreciate this is people who know. Our definition of education becomes different. Is it true that we live in a world today that people are acquiring all kinds of higher education, and yet they can't shed racism from themselves? Is that true? SubhanAllah. From the Islamic perspective, we don't call that an education. That is not an education. At the most, I'll call it skilled labor training. That's all that is. If you went to school for accounting, then okay, you could get a job as an accountant. That's pretty much what you learned. You learned some kind of craft. But you didn't learn to become a refined human being. And that's real education. Is not just about a craft. And craft is important, but above and beyond that, it is what makes you and me a refined human being. That's what revelation is for. That's what these ayat are for. إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِلْعَالِمِينَ. Okay, so that was a little bit of insight from the Meccan Quran. Now we turn to the Madani Quran. In the time that I have left. I have about 20 minutes left, I think?
As long as you want.
Okay, as long as I want. I don't think I'll take that. Okay. So Surah Al-Hujurat. Surah Al-Hujurat is basically the Quran's curriculum on how to live together. Easy. If you want to get along with each other and live as a harmonious community, take in the lessons of Surah Al-Hujurat and you'll be fine. It's a short surah, but it's extremely comprehensive in the lessons that it covers for how to get along with each other as a community. And of course it begins with the constitution of Islam itself. If you're going to be harmonious, then you have to observe, you all have to have the same code. You have to abide by the same ethics and law and morality, and that will come from Allah and His Messenger. So, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu la tuqaddimu bayna yaday Allahi wa rasulihi wattaqullah. Have reverence for Allah, have taqwa of Allah, have taqwa for, and don't get ahead of Allah and His Messenger, ﷺ. Don't put your opinions ahead of theirs, ahead of the revelation. That's where it begins. But what I want to highlight here is Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu. What does Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu mean? Anyone know? Oh, you who believe, those of you who believe, those of you who claim to believe. Okay, that's the first ayah. Second ayah, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu. Same address? Then third, you go further down, and in the sixth ayah, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu in ja'akum fasiq. So who's being addressed in the surah? If you keep hearing Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu. The believing, the Muslims. the Muslims of Medina are being addressed over and over and over again. Okay. Then, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ, believers are nothing but brothers. We heard those ayat, and I'll come back to them in a second. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا يَسْخَرْ قَوْمٌ مِّن قَوْمٍ. Those of you who believe, don't make fun of one group of another. Continuously, who's being addressed? Those of you who believe. Those of you who believe. Those of you. Then, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اجْتَنِبُوا كَثِيرًا مِّنَ الظَّنِّ. Those of you who believe, stay away as much as you can, and stay away from most kinds of suspicion. And then, out of nowhere, Ya ayyuhan nas, people. Not Ya ayyuhan ladhina amanu, but Ya ayyuhan nas. Now when Allah addresses people, is that one kind of people? Is that one race, one religion, one ethnicity, one group? No.
Everybody.
That ayah is for everyone. That ayah is for everyone. Now, what we are learning in this surah is remarkable. And I can't go through all of the lessons of the surah, but I'll highlight what serves our purpose for today. And that is that the Muslims themselves need some kind of training. Listen to this part carefully, please. The Muslims themselves need some kind of training. They need an orientation on certain things about how to live harmoniously with each other. And if they do this training right, then they have to take that training to who? All of humanity. Because the Quran was addressing the believing community. But when he says, Ya ayyuhan nas, it's not limited to them. Even though they're the ones receiving the ayat, they're the ones discussing them. As soon as the Muslim hears Ya ayyuhan nas, the Muslim realizes, this is something that only I don't need to learn. Who needs to learn this? Everyone needs to learn this. And who's going to spread it to everyone? I am. But I won't be able to until I have the proper training. The ayat of Ya ayyuhan ladhina amanu were training for the Muslim community. And if they can retrain themselves properly, then they are ready to take a message to all of humanity. And this is one of the universal messages of Islam. This is one of the, what does Islam want to share with the world? This is one of the Ya ayyuhan nas ayat are the ones you want to share with the world. That's what you want to share with the world. So now let's talk about some aspects of this training that we're supposed to pay attention to. Some of them I'll be brief, some of them I'll be more detailed. Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu in ja'akum fasiqun binaba'in fatabayyin. If a corrupt news comes to you, a corrupt source comes to you with some news, some corrupt guy comes to you with some news, then clarify it. Don't just listen to something and believe it. Don't rush to judgment about current events. That's just among ourselves even. That's not even outside it, just among ourselves. Don't just hear something and believe it. Number one. Let's move forward. Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, and I'm going to where the Shaykh recited, Shaykh Abdul Karim recited for us, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ أَخَوَيْكُمْ. Believers are nothing but brothers. Make peace between your brothers. And this ayah is actually preceding the ayah about Muslims fighting each other. وَإِنْ طَائِفَتَانِ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ اقْتَتَلُوا فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَهُمَا. When two groups of believers are fighting each other, make peace between them. I gave a khutbah about this a couple of weeks ago, and I remember talking about, in this particular ayah, Allah Azza wa Jalla has mentioned, first of all, He doesn't expect Muslims to fight with each other. Because if He did, it would be إِذَا طَائِفَتَانِ. It's in طَائِفَتَانِ, which is actually, it shouldn't happen. It's Allah's way of saying it shouldn't happen. But it can, and it might. And as a matter of fact, in our reality, it does. Muslims fight with each other. You have to learn to resolve your fights. You have to learn to end the arguments. And if two groups are fighting, the rest of the Muslims have to intervene and do everything they can to end the fight. That's what the ayat are about. And that's not just something we're doing because we love each other. We're doing that above and beyond us loving each other. We're doing that because that's a command of Allah. We have to do it. We have to end our arguments. And then He says, we're nothing but brothers. That's how we identify ourselves. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. So when somebody walks in, I don't care what color skin they are, what country they come from, whether I speak the same language as them or not, they walked into a masjid, they're my brother. That's my brother. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. I don't see anything but my brotherhood with them. As my teacher used to say, there are people who have bonds with each other because of family. Right? And even Allah acknowledges the bond of family. وَأُولُو الْأَرْحَامِ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلَىٰ بِبَعْضٍ فِي كِتَابِ اللَّهِ. The people that are tied by the womb are close to each other as far as Allah's book is concerned. But above and beyond that, when we share La ilaha illallah, then our bond together is thicker than blood. Sahaba were proof of that. They were willing to fight with family to protect the one they share the shahada with. The Shahada took over everything else. It became the source, the oath of allegiance to each other. That's what binds us together. And if our brotherhood is weak, maybe our La ilaha illallah isn't that strong. Because if our Shahada was strong enough, it's enough to make you brothers with each other. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ أَخَوَيْكُمْ. Now, moving along quickly. لَا يَسْخَرْ قَوْمٌ مِّن قَوْمٍ. One group of you shouldn't make fun of another group. It shouldn't, and sukhriya in Arabic is to be condescending. Making fun, joking around with someone is okay. Joking around with someone, with friends, with kids, all of that, that's fine. But when you start becoming offensive, and when you start talking down about a group, and then you justify it to your own, I'm just saying, just kidding. But they don't think that. They actually find it offensive. Then you have to cut that out. You have to cut that out. And then Allah, particularly also mentioned, you as a whole don't do it. وَلَا نِسَاءٌ مِّن نِسَاءٍ. Women, watch out. Don't do it. He told women not to do it also, especially. As if to say the way men make fun of each other is different and the way women make fun of each other is different. So you watch out for the way you do things. But again, that's not the topic. This is all training of how to live harmoniously with each other. And then, وَلَا تَلْمِزُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Don't call each other names. Don't give each other, bad nicknames. Don't blame each other. Don't judge each other. Things like that. And then don't use foul language. Foul language itself is not something that you should do. Then stay away from making assumptions about people. Don't rush to judgment about people. We started with, if corrupt news comes to you, don't take it. Clarify it. But now we're evolving to the point where if you see someone, before they even open their mouth, you've passed judgment about what they're all about. You've sized them up. Don't do that. Don't make assumptions about people. We do this in the Muslim community, not just just generally in regards to race, but we even do this in regards to any kind of appearance. If a person is dressed a certain way, whether or not they have a beard, whether or not a woman has a hijab, etc., we size them up. You guys owe me a favor because I just saved your lives. Anyway, so we size people up about where they stand in their religion. Whether or not they're even Muslim, don't make assumptions about them. And by the way, اجتنبوا كثيرا, we don't find this language in the Quran anywhere. Like اجتنبوا كثيرا. We find ijtinab, stay away from something. But we don't find kathiran with it. And this is important. This one I have to highlight. Ijtinab comes from jam, which means the side. And ijtinab means to go out of your way to get away from something that is right by your side. Which means assumptions are something that are always going to be there. Our trigger response for us is going to be, we're prone to making assumptions about people. And the ayah says, go out of your way to fight that tendency. So it's not just something, I don't make assumptions about people. Okay, you're cleansed from that problem. It doesn't work that way. You have to constantly reevaluate whether or not you're rushing to judgment and making assumptions about people. That's inside the ijtanibu kathiran. Kathiran could be hal here, kathiran could be qualitative or quantitative, to put it in non-technical terms. Qualitatively, it means as much as you can stay away from making assumptions. And in the other sense, it means in the most cases, you shouldn't make assumptions. So then the question arises, if I shouldn't make assumptions in most cases, when should I make assumptions? And the response to that is, you should make assumptions when you give benefit of the doubt. When you see a guy and a girl walking together in the mall, there we go. These people. No, you know what? Make an assumption for the better and say, they're probably married. They're probably brother and sister. Benefit of the doubt is a good kind of assumption. That you should. Any assumption you make about, here we go. This is how this person, I know what they have to say before they even open their mouth. Based on the color of their skin. Based on their look on the outside. That's the kind of assumption you need to get away from. You really need to get away from it. You need to work on yourself in deprogramming that out of your system. It's like a virus inside you. So he says, إِنَّ بَعْضَ الظَّنِّ إِثْمٌ. Some kinds of assumptions lead to sin. Now which kinds? The ones that are, about the negative side of another person, right? Beyond that, وَلَا تَجَسَّسُوا وَلَا يَغْتَبْ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا. Don't spy on each other, don't talk back against each other, behind each other's back. Those ayat are all preparation for the Muslim to deal with the bigger problem. And Allah knew that the problem of humanity and racism in humanity is going to be a major, major problem. Racism isn't just about somebody not getting a job. Racism isn't just about somebody not getting equal customer service at a store or getting preferential treatment on an airplane. Racism can cause wars. Racism can get millions of people killed. Racism can lead to blood spilling on the earth. Is that a reality today? Yeah. So we know that that's a much, much deeper, much bigger problem. So Allah says, Ya ayyuhan nas. Humanity, listen up. Inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. There's no doubt about it. We're the ones who created you from a male and a female. Now here's the beautiful part. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا. And we made you into shurub. I won't translate shurub yet. It's a beautiful word. It's commonly gets translated, we made you into nations and tribes. Have you heard that translation before? We made you into nations and tribes, right? We'll dig a little deeper into this word. It's important to understand. But before we get into that word, ja'alna, we made you this way. And ja'al is used in Arabic when something was a certain way and it was transformed into something else. If you have wood, you can do ja'al of it and make it a table. جَعَلْتُهُ طَاوِلَةً. I took it and made it into a table. The word ja'ala includes a transformation. Something was a certain way and it was made into something else. Allah is telling us, had He wanted, we would have been one race. In the word ja'ala, He's telling us, He didn't have to make us into different races. He could have just made all of us the same skin tone, all of us the same language, all of us the same culture. He could have done that. But He chose not to. He's the one who made us. By the way, He made us from how many families? How many parents? One parent. If you come from one parent, isn't it logical that you'll all be one race? Wouldn't that make sense that you're all one race? So the expected conclusion was, if you come from one father and one mother, you should all be the same race. But He says, no. After making you from a male and a female, miraculously, I'm the one who made you different. I intervened and didn't let you stay one race. You know? And Allah says, had He wanted, He could have made you one ummatan wahida. Could you made one nation? He didn't. So what did He make us into? Allah says He made us into shu'ub. Shu'ub is the plural of the word sha'ab. I love this word. Allah didn't say unasan, peoples. He didn't say aqwaman, nations. He said shu'ub, and it's a very precise word of the Arabic language. And the word sha'ab, it's one of those words in Arabic. It's hard to understand in English, this concept, but I'll explain as best I can. It's one of the words in Arabic that mean its opposite at the same time. It's called lughatul aqdad. It's the word, it means something, and it means its opposite at the same time. I'll give you an example of that, so it's kind of some idea you get of what I mean. The word al-hayy, or al-hayya in Arabic, means life. Life. But it's also used for a poisonous snake. Now when you think of a poisonous snake, what comes to mind? Life or death? Death. Something that takes life is a hayya. But if you're standing in a desert, all the sand is still, and you see something slither, you're going to think, hey, something alive is there, right? So it's a word that conjures up the image of life and death at the same time. It brings about the thoughts of itself and its opposite. That's from lughatul aqdad, the language of opposites, they call it. It's a rhetorical thing in classical Arabic. Shu'ub is one of those words. It makes you think of a number of things and their opposites. So what are those things? Al-jam' wa tafriq. Things coming together and things being apart at the same time. I'll give you a lughatul aqdad, but not lughatul aqdad, Lego al-aqdad. Piece of Legos, you put some Lego pieces together and you made something. And it's one thing, but if you look carefully, is it one thing or many things? It's many things. Like if you go to Legoland or something and see a giant, Empire State Building, it looks like one building, but when you get close, it's all these little Lego pieces, isn't it? So the word sha'ab means people overall, but actually very individual, very different. And the word sha'ab already means that I cannot say about the Nigerians, I cannot say about the Somalis, I cannot say about the Bangladeshis, I cannot say about the Malaysians, oh, they're all the same. No, there are people, but they're all individually very different. They have some commonalities, but then they have some things that are very different about them. That's inside the word sha'ab. Then the other side of it, which is really cool too, al-islah wal-ifsad. Sha'ab actually means to fix something and make something corrupt, to break something. Something that has good qualities and something that has bad qualities. Now Allah is saying every nation has good qualities And every nation has what? Bad qualities. Every human being has good qualities and every human being has bad qualities. And by extension, every culture can have some very good aspects to it and some very bad aspects to it. It can happen. So now no culture is perfect because we're all sure. No one culture has it all right. No one culture is supreme in every single way. It's impossible now. What this does, if we understand the logic of the ayah, number one, we can't judge any nation because they're not all the same. We can't stereotype people anymore because of the use of the word shurub. Number two, we cannot consider ourselves a perfect people because there is no such thing. When you come as people, there are some things that are great about you and there are some things that are terrible about you. We made you into nations, shuruban, nations that are diverse even within, and nations that have good and bad qualities. It's all inside one word. How comprehensive is that? How different is that from reading we made you into nations and tribes? It's a world of a difference. It changes perspective entirely. Now, watch this. You have one nation that's really good at one thing, but not so good at another. You have another nation that's the exact opposite. They're good at what this is bad at, this one's bad at, and they're bad at what this one's good at. What would be a great solution to this problem of two nations? If they learn from each other, then they can learn best practices from each other, can't they? And then all nations can improve. So Allah made us, by making us shu'ub, literally, He made us necessarily dependent on each other. So in the word shu'ub, by Allah making us shu'ub, it is as though Allah created a situation where you cannot have isolationism. We just want our people. We don't want to deal with any other people. We want everybody to be, all the people that look like us and talk like us and act like us, we should stay together and we should stay away from all other nations. No, because the word shu'ub is there, you want to get to know other people. Because they have something to offer you, just like you have something to offer them. Now, because the previous ayat already told us not to make assumptions about people and not to find faults in others, even if you realize the fault in other people, your focus is not on their faults. Your focus is on their good. What can you benefit from? And what can you benefit them with? That becomes the attitude. So he says, وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا. Then he says قَبَائِل. So beautiful. Then the word قَبَائِل. قَبَائِل is the plural of the word قَبِيلَة, which means tribe. And the word قَبِيلَة comes from the word قُبُل, which means back. What is that? قَبَائِل actually means, if you go قَبْل ذَلِكَ وَقَبْلَ ذَلِكَ وَقَبْلَ ذَلِكَ, they have an ancestry. We made you people of different ancestries, which means different heritages. Now if you go far back enough, where does all of our ancestry lead? He already told us. If you go far back enough in every قَبِيلَة, what's قَبْل كُلِّ هَذَا? It's Adam alayhi salam. You go back to that. But Allah mentions here, He made you qaba'il, and from qaba'il you get there are traditions that come from before. There's folklore, there's architectural history, there's language, there's song. There are different aspects of every culture that are made, that Allah Azza wa Jalla crafted. So He made you this way. And every tribe, every culture in this sense, has its own unique identity. But why did He do that? Why did He make us all so different? Why couldn't He just make us one? Humanity would have been one. Can you imagine? Allah could have made that decision way back then, an executive decision from Allah, and we wouldn't have a discussion about racism. It wouldn't be there. He says, here's why I did this. لِتَعَارَفُوا لِتَعَارَفُوا, which is roughly translated, so you get to know one another. You get to know one another. Al-urf in Arabic also means cultural norms. Every society, every tribe, every nation has certain norms. So you can understand each other's norms is within the meaning. They're not going to be like your own norms. They're going to be different. The way they eat is going to be different. The way they sleep is going to be different. The way they talk is going to be different. The way their family structure is going to be different. And you're going to appreciate the difference in them. You're going to get to know it. They say, رَجُلُ الْعَارِفْ أي صَبُور. This is how the Arab argues. Someone who knows in Arabic, there's alim, someone who knows. But if you call someone arif, then you're actually saying they're extremely patient. Because they understand things from a different perspective. So they're not as shocked by something or offended by something. Allah says, I made you into different nations and tribes so you can go and explore other people, learn about them, and when you learn about them, what at first seemed to you as so offensive and so backwards, Now you appreciate it from within, so you're patient towards it. You have an appreciation for it. And so we're learning that we cannot have urf. We cannot develop patience with each other and appreciation for each other until we interact with each other. Until we explore the diversity of different cultures. We don't want to have one monolithic society with one culture. By the way, the nation that wanted everybody to be like them, or said that we are number one, nobody can be like us, we have the ideal, we have the ideal way of living. The phrase for that in the Quran is أَطَّرِيقَتِكُمُ الْمُثْلَى, your ideal lifestyle, the exemplary lifestyle, that was Fir'aun. So when human beings lose their humanity, they start thinking they're perfect in everything. And their nation is perfect. That's a sign that you're no longer really a human anymore. You've lost it. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. It's to this phrase on its own is the death of racism. It's the death of racism. This is why I gave you, your diversity. Now, as the ayah concludes, and I conclude, إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلِيمٌ خَبِيرٌ. The most noble among you. What did the ayah begin with? You remember? Was it Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu or Ya ayyuhan nas? Who remembers? Oh, it wasn't Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu. This was Ya ayyuhan nas. People. People are being addressed, not Muslims. Muslims are not being addressed. People are being addressed. And Allah says the most noble among you are the ones that have the most taqwa. The most God conscious. Now, I would expect Allah would say the most noble among the Muslims are the ones that have the most taqwa. Because you assume and I assume that taqwa belongs to who? Muslims. Allah said, all of humanity, listen up. The most noble among you are the ones that have the most taqwa. Allah did not restrict taqwa to Muslims. Because there could be non-Muslims that have taqwa. And Allah will guide them. And you don't know that because taqwa is on the inside. So there could be a righteous person living in your neighborhood and he's not a Muslim, but he's noble in the sight of Allah. Even non-Muslims. He could be noble. Who knows, Allah will guide him. Maybe he has taqwa already inside him. He just doesn't have hidayah yet. He doesn't even have guidance yet. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. And how are you supposed to know if they have taqwa or not? Ya Allah, how am I going to know if somebody has more taqwa or not? Because Allah says the most noble of us are the ones who have the most taqwa. So maybe there should be some taqwa sticker that we give people. So we can give them scores and points and we can tell who we should respect and who we shouldn't respect. That guy's got a lot of taqwa, so I should respect him. Muslims fall into this category all the time. We say, I get emails, brother, I met I have a friend, he's got a lot of taqwa. Or I met a sheikh, he had a lot of taqwa. Or, this girl says, I met a guy on Facebook, he's got a lot of taqwa. He quotes a lot of ayat. Okay, where do we begin with this? You and I give each other benefit of the doubt. And no one knows the level of taqwa of anyone else. No one knows. And to make that clear, nobody can make that clearer than Allah Himself. So He says, Inna Allaha alimun khabir. No doubt Allah in fact is the one that is all-knowing and has full account. In other words, Allah says, by the way, you should have the most respect for the people of most taqwa, but I won't tell you who they are. What does that leave you with? You should have the highest respect for everyone because you don't want to take a chance of dishonoring someone who Allah has honored. It makes you an honorable people. It makes you an honoring people, a respecting people. This is what we're supposed to be. And if we learn to carry ourselves this way, we just stick out. The world, the comedy culture around us, the high school culture is extremely racist. It's getting even more racist nowadays. The entertainment culture is racism. They talk about political correctness, and the more they talk about it, the more its artificial nature becomes apparent to everybody. It's artificial. It's so surface. It's so surface. We are so far from fitrah. It's mind-boggling. And one of the worst things that's happened to us, that we've lost the original decency Allah gave us, is manifested racism. It's manifested in other ways too, and I'm leaving you with this one, because my head is spinning from this one, because I was on a flight just now recently. Just yesterday I got off a flight, and there was a very chatty lady next to me. I said, so you going home? I was like, yep. She said, me too. I was like, okay, that's cool. But she wouldn't stop, she just kept going. So, you married? Yes, I'm married. Kids? Yes, I have 6 kids. So when somebody asks, do you have kids? what's the courteous follow-up question from you? Well, what about you? Do you have children? No, I have a dog. And I still have a headache from her response. I didn't say, do you have a pet? I didn't refer to what other creatures live in your household. I said, do you have children? And she said, no, I have a dog. I can't wrap my head around this. Because in her mind, why would you need children if you have a dog? You see? And she talked to me about how children are such high maintenance. She talked to me about that. And I didn't want to, insult her or anything. And I'm like, you walk around picking up your dog's poo off the street. And children are high maintenance? But I didn't want to say that to her, but I wanted to highlight something. How far from fitrah we are. That people say, well, I really want the loving companionship of something to take care of, which Allah put in us because Allah put a want of having what? Children. But I don't want to have children because they're high maintenance and you have to get them insurance. Dogs don't need insurance. So we're just going to go with fluffy. The two things are equated to them. It's just one of the indications. I brought this tangent up because one of the indications of how far from the natural order of things we have come. How these weird aberrations have become normal to us as a society. And then racism certainly is a part of that. I pray that Allah Azza wa Jalla alleviates this ummah from its racism. I pray that we become a people that appreciate the diversity that Allah has gifted us with and makes us learn from each other's strengths and help each other overcome each other's weaknesses. Just like one Muslim brother is supposed to be to his other Muslim brother, we benefit from his good things and we advise him and counsel him and help him with his weaknesses. That's what you are supposed to do for me and I am supposed to do for you. That is what we're supposed to do at the level of nations and tribes, at the level of entire ethnicities and cultures. May Allah Azza wa Jalla make us one ummah in the true sense of the word. Barakallahu wa lakum. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair, Nouman, mashallah. That was great. I took a little bit of offense to the dog part because I had 15 cats growing up, little known fact. And I love my cats. I love my children too. But I want to thank Ustad Nouman for coming again. So inshallah ta'ala, right now we're just getting started. So how long of a break do you guys need? You guys need a 5-minute break or a 10-minute break? Give them 10? Okay. What time is it right now?
11:20.
That's the Jum'ah clock that gives the Khatib 2 extra minutes. What time is it really right now?
11:18.
It's 11:18, right? Okay. So we'll give you guys a 12-minute break, inshallah. We'll start at 11:30, inshallah ta'ala. Okay? 11:30 sharp, inshallah. We'll start for those of you that are online, inshallah ta'ala, stay tuned, and we'll be coming back, inshallah, in 11 minutes. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum.